Welcome to the tip channel. That is perfection. This morning we're going to show you how to do a post-form countertop with rounded corners. Now this is for a reception desk pass-through window, and we're going to do 4-inch radiuses on the one side and 6-inch radiuses on the other. My first step is that I took a piece of 1/4-inch material and my compass. I marked the material and then I cut that with my jigsaw. Now, when you're dealing with a 1/4-inch thick material, you can get a fairly decent radius with a jigsaw, and you can also touch that up with your belt sander a little bit. But we've got our radiuses prepared. This is on 1/4-inch melamine material. Now, the bushing that I'm using in my router is a 1-inch brass bushing, and I'm using a 1/2-inch bit. So that means that my cut is going to be about a 1/4 of an inch from the edge of my melamine. So what I've done, I took my speed square and I set it at 3/16. I marked the corner at that 3/16 and then marked it with a 5mm pencil. So what does that mean? I'm going to be about a 64th or so away from my cut with that line. So it gives me a good start and a good ending point on my board. Now I'm using a Porter cable plunge cut router. What's a plunge cut? Plunge cut, basically, if you were doing, say, for instance, a sink bowl, you could actually start in the middle of the cutout, pull this lever over, and drop the router down into the cut. And that's what plunge cut means. Now, the reason I'm using this router is not so much because of the plunge cut, it is because of the cam feature. And what I'm talking about is this has a steel rod and a cam. I'm going to bring you in for a close-up. So this Porter cable router has a rod, and this rod comes down and it hits on this cam. Now this cam rotates. So that's a 1/4 inch deeper, that's a 1/4 inch deeper, 1/4 inch deeper, so on. So what I can do is, rather than trying to hog off the entire corner at one time, I'll take 1/4 inch steps so that I'm not hard on my router and I'm not going to get a bunch of router chatter because of trying to take too much of a cut at one time. Okay, so I have my template set on my 3/16 pencil line that I put on the product. I've got my template clamped to the board, and I've got my board clamped to the table. So now we're ready to start. I've got my router set at the first stop, which is basically 1/4 of an inch deep. And as I mentioned, we'll take this a 1/4 inch at a time. Okay, we've completed our first radius corner. Now, as you can see, this cut is perfect up and down. So it's a perfect 90-degree angle with our top and very, very smooth going around there. I'll be able to take my laminate and work that right around that corner. Had I tried to do it with a jigsaw, the problem is that jigsaw blade would have wandered out, would have wandered in a little bit. It wouldn't have been perfect up and down. And when you're running laminate, you need that perfect up and down for your laminate to be able to go around that corner very easily. Okay, we have our 4 radiuses done on our countertop. As I mentioned, 4-inch on the one side, which is on the reception side, and we've got 6-inch radius on the other side. Now, the next step is that we want to do our edge bands. Now, laminate is very, very durable, very resistant to scratches, very heat resistant. Where laminate is weak is whenever you leave a little bit of an edge of something so that you can catch it and pull that laminate away from the material. So that's the reason you put your edge bands on first, and then you do your deck. Naturally, if you were to do your edge bands last, 2 things. Number one is your dark brown line is going to be pointing straight up at you, which looks terrible. And the second thing is, then you're leaving a spot where if that laminate's up just a hair, somebody's going to catch it and chip the laminate right off. So edge bands first. Now, we did 4 and 6-inch radiuses. Is it possible to do a tighter radius. Basically, you can go down to about a 3-inch radius very comfortably using V16 laminate. Now, what does V16 mean? V16 is a 1/16 of an inch thick. Now, that's the thicknesses normally done on countertops, and also be referred to as horizontal grade. I won't teach you the terminology of horizontal and vertical. That's a little risky. Anyways, basically, the laminate also is available in what's referred to as a V32nd. Now, it will be a 32nd of an inch thick, and it's more made for like cabinetry, or again, a vertical surface. Now, it being thinner, you can go a little tighter with it. So, can you go smaller than 3? Yes, definitely possible. Here's how that actually can be done. Number one is to take your belt sander and sand the back side of your laminate. That makes it a little thinner, a little easier to go around the corner. The second thing is to use heat. Now, you see a lot of countertops nowadays with real fancy edges, and that's how they're actually able to do that. First of all, they're using a post-forming laminate, a little thinner than the 1/16 of an inch, but more importantly is they're using heat. They're heating that laminate up to make those contours. Now, that is sort of a risky process, meaning that laminate is very heat resistant, but there is going to be a point where the laminate is going to blister and it's going to crack. So once you reach that threshold with laminate, you can end up with some damage. But with the radiuses that we're doing today, it's not going to be a problem. It's going to go right around that without an issue. Now, fortunately, I have a wall on each side, and I've only bought 8-foot laminate, so it's not going to make it all the way around my top. I'm going to do a seam here and a seam here, which is in the center of my wall, so I don't have to worry about the seam, but I am going to show you how to make a perfect seam as well if you stick around. Now, in working with laminate, a few tools that comes in very handy. Number one is you can take your full sheet and use your table saw and cut it. You can also use what's referred to as a hand slitter. This has 2 wheels on it, and as you pass it through your laminate, it makes real nice strips. And actually, this has an adjustable fence where you can adjust it for different widths of strips. Also is what's referred to as a J-roller. You can just use your hand to press laminate in, but the J-roller will give you a lot more pressure than what you can get with your hand. For larger pieces, a T-roller. Also great with working with laminate is a paper cutter. Paper cutter does a real nice job of trimming edges, squaring up things. Very, very nice clean cut with a paper cutter. As I wrap this around the corner, that probably will be fine, but I do a little overkill. I use a countertop clamp, and basically what it has a clamp which clamps down against the top, and then one that comes in against the laminate. So what I'll probably do is to apply this and allow the glue to set for a while so that I'm sure I'm getting a great adhesion on that. Now, to adhere the laminate to the subsurface, I'll be using a Wilson Art 500 brushable adhesive. Now, this works fine with a paintbrush or roller, so I'll be using a throwaway brush from Home Depot. Once I'm through, I'll just toss it. But basically, for the edge of your particle board, keeping in mind this is your raw particles. So what you want to do is you want to glue it once, let that dry, and then glue it again. Now, we're working with contact adhesive. What does contact adhesive mean? Contact means the minute it hits that and makes contact, it's going to adhere. So you want to make sure your piece is in position before you lay it down. Because if not, like it says, it's then stuck. So then you're forced to either use some lacquer thinner to pull it loose again, or to use some heat to reactivate the glue to take the piece back off. So just be careful when you're sticking. It'll go just fine. All right, so we glued the particle board edge twice. We glued the laminate once. And we're about 15 minutes out from the time we did that. Now what you're looking for is you want to be able to touch the laminate and the wood and the glue not come off on your fingers. If it comes off on your fingers, it's too early to stick. You want them to actually be dry. Now, from this point, you have about a 45-minute window to stick this piece. If you forget and walk away or get an emergency, don't worry about it. Come back, re-glue it, and it will be just fine. But once you go past that 45-minute window, you do want to re-glue. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stick our laminate. Now, one little tip in regards to the glue is naturally, yes, you're going to get glue on your fingers, you're going to get glue on the laminate. Don't concern yourself with that too much, because basically it'll come right off with lacquer thinner. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and work this around the corner, and we will apply our countertop clamps. And as I mentioned, this is just a little safe proof, if you will, that just sort of holds this nice and tight until the laminate glue can fully cure. Okay, next up we're going to use a laminate trimmer to trim some of the excess off. A couple things. Number one is that's going to release some of the tension on this corner because we're going to narrow our strip. Now, to router that off, what I'm using is a flush cut bit, and it has a bearing on the bottom of it. So the bearing will ride on the particle board substrate. Okay, so as I mentioned, my seam is not being shown because it's covered by a wall. But I promised you guys I was going to show you how to make a perfect seam with laminate. Now, this is what's referred to as a butterly underscribe router. Now, this router is about 40 years old, so it's probably older than some people who's watching this video. Don't know if you can make this out or not, but see what that says? Made in the USA. This is back from when things were made here. People took pride in their product. This is 40 years old and still as good as the day I bought it. Now, how does a butterly underseam router work? See this guide? This guide rides on the piece of laminate underneath of the piece that you're cutting. And then there is a router bit, and that router bit cuts the top piece of laminate so that you end up with a perfect seam. Okay, now what I've done is I've overlapped this piece that I put on first about a ½ inch. Now with the butterly, you can go up to about 1 inch on overlap. Now this guy is going to ride on this piece of laminate, and it's going to cut this top piece of laminate. And look at that, a beautiful seam. With our edge bands finished, next step is that we took a belt sander and we went around the top to make sure that our edge band was totally even with the deck of the countertop. Now, with the belt sander, you want to keep the flat spot of the sander on the board. You don't want to go way over here and bevel it down. Excuse me. The second thing is, you want it so that your belt is pulling against that laminate. You don't want to pull it away from the substrate. So pull it against the substrate and keep the flattest part of your sander on the board so that you don't bevel it down. Now, you want to do that to the top, but you also want to do it to the bottom. Again, what we're after is we don't want to leave any edge there for something to catch on and pull the laminate away from the substrate. This top will last many, many years without any issues, as long as there's no edges for something to catch on and pull the laminate loose. Now, to apply the laminate to our top, again, we'll be using the Wilson Art 500. We'll be using a normal paint roller. These are just cheap rollers. When I get done, naturally, this will just get tossed. And a roller pin. Now, I won't have any problem at all in sticking this large of a piece of laminate. If you don't feel comfortable, use some push sticks. What are push sticks? Basically, just 3/4 inch scraps. So what you'll do is you lay them down. You'll lay your laminate on top of that. Make sure naturally they're nice and clean. But you'll lay your laminate on top of that. You can start from the one side, pull a strip out, stick it down. Pull the next strip out, stick it down. So forth and so on. So, like I said, if you're a little hesitant in regards to doing your deck, use your push sticks. Now, the edge band, naturally, we glued the particle board twice because we were the raw particles of the board. With the deck, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is one coat. So one coat on the deck, one coat on the laminate. They'll be ready to put the two pieces together. We'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to show you how to do the router. Okay, our glue is dry and we are ready to stick. Now, what I normally do is about a 1 inch overhang all the way around. So I have plenty of laminate. And then naturally we'll router off the access. Okay, now you want to apply a lot of pressure, especially to the edges. What you do want to be careful of is you don't want to roll off the edge. If you roll off the edge, naturally could be a possibility of cracking the laminate, and we don't want that to happen. So next up, we're ready to router. Now, before I forget, these are bearing bits, meaning we have a bearing at the end of it that rides on the countertop, and then it has a cutter wheel. So, two things. Number one is the cutter edge and the bearing will get clogged up with glue. What will happen is that bearing will seize up and you'll end up putting a burn on your laminate. So you don't want that. So you want to squirt this with WD-40 occasionally to keep that glue from sticking to your router. Now, first bit that I'm going to use is going to be a flush cut, and that's going to basically cut things flush. Now what I will do is I will take and actually tilt it out just a little bit so that I don't come close at all to the edge that we just applied earlier. After I do the flush cut, then I'm going to use what's referred to as a no-foul router bit. Now, nobody likes to foul. We still will need to foul, but this will get us a lot closer. And if you can pick up on it, this thing is actually angled, so you can adjust the depth of it so that you can get extremely close with your router bit. And then we'll finish up with fouling. Now, one thing to keep in mind with your router is turning in a clockwise direction. So in other words, your cutter on this bit is right here, and it's turning in a clockwise motion. So will the router cut both ways? Yes, it will. But if you go from left to right, that cutter is going into your material, so you get a much nicer cut. If you go from right to left, it'll cut, but what will happen is the router will want to tend to get away from your countertop. So, like I said, left to right works a lot better with these routers. Okay, next up is filing. Now, what I like to do is take a little bit of lacquer thinner and go ahead and hit the edge of that countertop. Because as we start to file, we'll also knock loose some of that excess glue. So make it a little easier on cleaning. Now, when you're filing, first of all, a laminate file really works best. It has a coarse side and it has a fine side. So I'll hit it with the coarse side first, and I'll go almost flush with the coarse, and then I'll flip over, go to about a 45-degree angle with the fine. That'll just soften that edge so we don't have a real sharp edge on the countertop. When I'm finished filing, what I'll do is I'll take my fingernails. Again, Your fingers can feel more than your eyes can see, so take your fingernails and see if you can feel an edge. If you can feel an edge, you haven't filed enough. Again, you do not want to allow something there for something to get caught on. So we want to eliminate any edge. So we'll go ahead and get this thing filed up. We just finished filing. And I know what you're thinking, man, that sucked. Yeah. Nobody likes filing. Unfortunately, it is a part with working with laminate. And good filing just comes with practice. The more you do, the easier it becomes. Big thing about filing is take your time. A little bit at a time, it'll work out just fine. Now, if you're working with a darker color, a lot of manufacturers use a lighter phenolic backer underneath of the top color sheet. So what ends up happening is you end up with this white line if you got a little heavy with your filing. If that happens, take a permanent marker like a Sharpie, touch it up a little bit, and you'll be surprised that that does hide an awful lot. But like I said, once you've done it so long, you'll never have an issue with filing. So that's the end of our project. And how did it turn out? This is the tip channel. That is perfection. What? It's not cocky when you back it up. Thank you much for watching. I hope that you found this informative, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Thank you much, and have a wonderful day.